Hey everyone, welcome back to Keto and Krime. Today we have the much anticipated review of Alfred Hitchcock's 1948 thriller Rope. As you recall, a few days ago, I did the crime that this is based on, loosely based on. That is the real life 1924 murder of murder spree of, well, it wasn't really a spree, it was one murder by Leopold and Loeb, two very privileged young men that felt that they were justified in murder for art. So the events of that murder were eventually created a play written into a play form by Patrick Hamilton called Rope. Instead of the ice chisel, it was a rope, and this became a very popular play, both on and off Broadway, and eventually it was developed into a film adaptation by two writers, very famous writers of the 1930s through 60s era, Hume Cronyn and Arthur Laurents. Hume Cronyn was not only a legendary screenwriter and playwright, he was also a legendary actor, best known for his performances in the original Phantom of the Opera film adaptation of 1943, Cleopatra, Richard Burton's Hamlet, as well as modern classics like A Honky Tonk Freeway, Brewster's Millions, Cocoon, in which he starred with his wife, the legendary Jessica Tandy. He died in 2003 at the age of 91. He was no stranger to Alfred Hitchcock, having been in his earlier single-shot, single-scene classic Lifeboat a few years before, helping to write the screenplay for Rope. The other screenplay writer was Arthur Laurents. Arthur Laurents was also a very famous writer and playwright of the time. He wrote several for Alfred Hitchcock, including The Turning Point, and was most well known for his work on Broadway musicals and plays. I'm going to name off a ton of well-known plays and musicals, and you will be blown away. West Side Story, Gypsy, Hallelujah Baby, Nick and Nora, The Birdcage, A Clearing into the Woods, An Invitation to March. He also directed the film adaptation of An Invitation to March and Gypsy. So a very, very well-known writer, director. He was also romantically involved with one of the stars of the film, Farley Granger, who plays Philip. And you are not wrong in assuming that this film has a ton of gay undertone. On a gayness scale, and I'm saying that as a gay member of the gay community, gayness scale, this is running a hard 10.
Nuts and honey.
What'd you say?
Nut and honey.
I bet you can't eat just one.
I bet I could.
So it's definitely out there. It is highly alluded to that the two leads are involved. We'll just leave it that way. They live together. There's mention of there only being one bedroom. Even though one of them alludes to having had a relationship with one of the female guests at the party, it's still alluded to that they are together. And so the gay undertones run strong in Rope. But let's talk about the movie. Is it good? Yes, this is a very good movie. It is one of Alfred Hitchcock's best. It is one of his many limited scenery, limited setting movies, the first being 1944's Lifeboat, also starring Hume Cronyn, and takes place all in one area. Whereas the Lifeboat was the Lifeboat, this one takes place in one Manhattan apartment. Now, there's quite a few differences between this and the Leopold and Loeb case. As you know, that took place in Chicago. This takes place in New York. The murder weapons are different, but the theme and context and reasons for the murder remain the same. There's still discussion of Nietzsche, of the Superman, and how some people are just privileged and more intelligent and can do murder for art's sake. Literally. Not only is it limited in set, it's also limited in shot. Alfred Hitchcock wanted to give the illusion of a play on film. Now, this is not uncommon. Look at the 1956 adaptation of The Bad Seed, in which it is literally adapted from a book, which was adapted from a play, and they literally brought the same cast members from the play on to make the movie, and it was shot as if it was a play. So very limited scene change, very limited shot change. As far as this movie, they wanted to do it as if it's all taking place in no more than one room, although there are a couple of scenes in little offshoot rooms. But for the most part, it all takes place in the living room of a Manhattan apartment. Everything from the murder to the party afterwards. And they literally wanted to make it as if it was a play come to life on screen. But the problem is, in the 40s, you still had real film. Like, there was no digital anywhere in sight. So, basically, Alfred Hitchcock had to give the illusion of one long take, even though there are 10 to 12 very distinct shot changes if you actually look at the film. And I have sat there and looked at them. I know I'm a nerd. But the way he would accomplish this, because film would only carry about 10 to 12 minutes worth of film, so those had to be changed out quite frequently. So what he would do is have the actors. These were very long shots. I have worked on movies, so I know that in most cases you break scenes up into very small bite-sized pieces, and you do take after take after take until you get it right. In this one, he had the actors train as if they were in a play, and they had to assume they were doing it before a live audience, and the takes were very long because there was no time to waste. He had to get them all in one long shot, so they were required to stay in character, continue their lines without mistake, without any sort of interruption, so that he could get his takes. And he made it seem like one very long take. By when it was time to change the film, he would have the camera gear in on either a person's back, a wall, a table, and the screen would just go black for about a half a second, and then it would start back up with the same action. So it really appears to be one long shot, even though it's actually 10 to 12 very distinct shots. The cast was also very limited, as was the crew. There was only 9 people in this film, the stars being Jimmy Stewart, who was who's a living legend, or was a living legend at the time. He plays Rupert Cattle, the hero of the movie, although I use that term very loosely. John Dahl as Brandon, and Farley Granger as Philip. Those are the 3 main, and then there are 6 others that are essentially party guests and the murder victim. So basically you start out, as Hitchcock often does, with shock right from the beginning. You have, whereas maybe in Psycho, you had her, stealing the money and driving off. That was shock factor. And then, she dies really quickly on because you think she's the final girl, but she's not. You really think this is going to be a murder mystery that you're going to have to decide who did it, why they did it, and where they did it. It leaves nothing to the imagination because the very first shot is from the street to the window is the murder, where you see Philip and Brandon choking a classmate of theirs from Harvard. So these are very well connected, very wealthy, very privileged boys, just like Leopold and Loeb. And they are strangling him with a rope. Once they have finished, they put him into a large desk, a book case of some sort. It's just a, like an old toy box, but kind of stylish. And they actually put him in there and then proceed to have a dinner party, including lots of David's family, including his parents, his current girlfriend or fiance, and other people that have known David. And they serve dinner right on top of the case in which the body is laying. So, kind of sick once you think about it. This is a heavy dialogue-driven movie. So you are fans of old-fashioned crime dramas like The Maltese Falcon, Key Largo, things like that, you will enjoy this movie. Very heavily dialogue-driven, not a lot of action, just a lot of exposition and a lot of debate back and forth as they have invited their former prep school housemaster, who is also an instructor in college and prep schools, Rupert Cadell, who is played by Jimmy Stewart, who is the one that introduced them to Nietzsche's idea of the Superman. In fact, they do talk about the Superman quite a bit and how there's a privileged elite that have the right to decide who has the right to live and therefore kill at will. And there's, of course, the debate that the Nazis use this as well, and just a lot of things. And then you see the differences between the two main characters, Brandon and Philip. Brandon is having sport with it. It's very obvious that he's into this, that he feels he's perfectly justified in killing David, and he is literally just having the time of his life. He's taking unnecessary chances. He's saying things that allude to David may or may not show up. He's just being very cheeky. Philip, on the other hand, is having a much harder time. So if we were going to say who was Leopold and who was Loeb, Brandon is definitely Leopold, and Philip is definitely Loeb, who's the first one to crack. And you see him become more like the protagonist in Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart, where guilt gets the best of him, and he ends up giving himself away, even though the cops are not even looking at him. So you kind of see that start to building Philip. He's having outbursts. He's not handling it well. And based on how the two are acting, plus the fact that David, who was supposed to be at this party, hasn't shown up, and his parents are getting worried, and his father wants to go home and call and hopefully get the police, thinking he's been in an accident, you have Rupert getting suspicious. So the party is over. They leave. They think they've gotten away with it. They're about to leave to go up to Connecticut, and on the way to Connecticut, they're going to bury the body. But basically, they get a buzz, and Rupert wants to come back up. He's lost his cigarette case. So he comes back up. He finds the case. He starts to question them more, and eventually, basically, Philip breaks. It's just brilliant exposition. Philip breaks, actually pulls a gun, ends up shooting Rupert in the hand. Rupert disarms him, and then he basically goes over and opens the case and sees the body. And at that point, he knows he needs to get the authorities, which he does in a very unusual way. I won't tell you how. You need to watch the film. But during the time, he gives this long monologue about who are you to decide who lives and dies, and he blames himself. He realizes that he introduced these two boys to these very controversial ideas and actually set them on the path to what they've done. And he tells them right away, I was wrong, you were wrong, this is wrong. We're human beings, we all have to live by the same code, no one is better than anyone else. So you see his redemption arc coming around. Philip is crying. You see that there's a chance for redemption there, but Brandon just seems disappointed. So I would think that if you had to label Brandon, it would definitely be a sociopath or a psychopath. not a doctor. I'll leave that to Dr. Grande. But definitely shows that he doesn't care. The movie is brilliant. Like I said, it's heavily exposition driven, not a lot of action. If you're, like you said, if you're a fan of old crime dramas or even more modern classics like any of the Quentin Tarantino or Kevin Smith movies that rely on just witty dialogue, you'll love this movie. Another great thing about it is how you see it going from light to dark. It starts out, you know, late afternoon, and you see the murder take place, and then the entire time after the murder, it's going from lighter to darker, and it's getting more ominous in the apartment. Alfred Hitchcock was brilliant. He made this movie for $1.5 million, which back then was a lot of money, and it ended up making about $2.5 million at the box office, not counting all the stuff it's made from being kind of a cult classic and being rented and streamed over and over. So this was a very profitable movie. It's a very short movie. It's only about 80 minutes, so it's not going to take you a whole day. It's a great short thriller kind of movie, and if you enjoy it, you will. If you enjoy thrillers, you will enjoy this movie. And I give it a 10 out of 10. It's filmmaking at its best, and it is just very entertaining from the first scene to the last scene. And it's always fun spotting Alfred Hitchcock and his cameos. He does a cameo in almost all of his films, and I find it very, very fun to look for him. So look for him in this movie. He and his longtime assistant are both in this movie, and they're very quick and out. So watch the movie. If you've seen the movie, let me know where you saw Alfred Hitchcock. Anyway, great movie based on the Leopold and Loeb murders, which I have done a video on those. That will be posted up here if you want to see the backstory. And a well done movie. Can't complain about Rope. See it. And if you have seen it before, see it again, because every time I watch it, I see something new. And with that being said, I'll see you again really soon. Until next time, Keto and Krime.